So it was a competitive bidding process,
Sure.
quite a competitive one. It was 18 billion. And what we are getting for it is basically an entire retail banking franchise. So it includes the client base, around 200,000 clients.
When you look at the two banks, we find there are a lot of similarities in terms of how we customer groups that we service,
Right.
The propositions that we have built in. We feel these similarities, will bring in a lot of value, in terms of our service delivery, the proposition delivery, and serving that customer groups, without too much of an interruption.
So in terms of, as with any large transactions,
Right.
right, you have to do your risk reward modeling to ensure that the returns are identified properly. So immediately you do have an impact to your P&L and to your balance sheet. But this portfolio is going to generate returns immediately.
Nations Trust Bank will acquire the consumer banking business of HSBC in Sri Lanka. And today we're discussing the strategy and intent of this transaction. In the studio with us today to discuss this are Hemantha Gunetilleke, who is the CEO of NTB, Sheahan Daniel, Executive Vice President of Consumer Banking, and Kushlani Allis, who's the Chief Financial Officer of NTB. So Hemantha, Sheahan, Kushlani, it's wonderful to have you here in the studio at Echelon. Hemantha, let's start with you. The transaction, the retail banking acquisition that you're about to do of HSBC's consumer business, besides scale, what does this do for NTB? What gaps in your portfolio, if at all, are you trying to address with this acquisition?
Yeah. No, thanks, Shaman. In answering that, let me kind of track back a bit in terms of looking at the banking industry. So banking, if you look at it from outside, very often it looks fairly generic. We deal in accounts, we deal in debt, with credit cards, stuff like that, branches. But in the last 15 to 20, 25 years, within the banking industry globally and also in Sri Lanka, that has really changed. And what's happened is it's become a lot more segmented and a lot more proposition oriented.
Right.
And what we've seen in the last, I'd say 25 years, where there's been a clear focus in terms of segmentation, propositions, and a separation between relationship managed propositions, digital propositions, and what we call mass propositions. So NTB, from our inception, our strategy has been to follow a very focused, segmented strategy.
Right. And can I ask you where you are currently? You talked about 3 potential propositions in financial services. Where does NTB fit in right now?
So our business is structured around 3 customer groups. So we are a very customer-centric organization. The entire bank is structured around our customers. So the 3 pillars are consumer banking. So that's basically all individual clients. Commercial banking, so those are SMEs, businesses, and so on, and corporate banking, so those are the large corporates listed to the large family-owned businesses. So within that, consumer is a big one, and I think this transaction is about really the consumer banking pillar being expanded. In consumer, our focus has been predominantly on the premium segment.
Right.
So our proposition for the last 25 years has been what we call Nations Trust Bank private banking. It's your high net worth, premium segment service proposition. It's relationship managed. And we've got deep experience in that because we've done it for about 25 years. Apart from that, we also focus a lot on what we call the mass-affluent. That's your salaried corporate employees, kind of that segment. And also what we call the mass, the digital mass.
Sure.
As you know, we launched the first fintech in Sri Lanka, first digital bank, FreeMe, about 10 years ago. So through FreeMe and our digital banking assets, we focus mainly on the digital mass.
Great.
So in consumer, that's how we are structured.
Right. Let's also talk about this transaction before we get deeper into the conversation. Just by way of background, can you tell us the kind of headline numbers or the bullet points about the transaction you're going to do, which is you are about to acquire HSBC's consumer banking business
Yes.
in Sri Lanka. How big is that business? When will you do this? When will you complete this acquisition? And how much are you paying for it?
Yeah. I'll start with how much we're paying because that's a disclosed number.
Right.
So it was a competitive bidding process,
Sure.
quite a competitive one. It was 18 billion. And what we are getting for it is basically an entire retail banking franchise. So it includes the client base, around 200,000 clients, which includes a premium segment client base in consumer, a fairly large credit card base. We are the market leader in credit cards through MX. They are the number 2. So it's kind of a merging of 1 and 2.
Right.
So it's a huge opportunity.
Sure. In terms of cards issued, you're saying?
In terms of cards issued.
Right. Okay.
And also it includes the branch network, so around 7 branches. So that will strengthen our network, especially in the Western Province and in the core urban Colombo. So that's kind of the broad perimeter, if you like.
Sure. So does that mean HSBC employees currently will transition to NTB? Is that a given? Is that an option? How does that work?
Absolutely. So the idea is to make the transaction seamless for customers, for incoming customers. And we are in the service industry. And you can't make it seamless for an incoming customer in acquisition if you don't have the people coming with them.
Sure.
So part of the transaction is to welcome the retail banking talent from HSBC, and that's part of the transaction.
Sheahan, let me bring you into the conversation. Now, HSBC's retail customers bring different expectations, shaped by, I think, the fact that this bank has a global network, a global presence, right? How is NTB evolving its consumer banking model to meet those expectations?
Yeah. When you look at the two banks, we find there are a lot of similarities in terms of how we, the customer groups that we service,
right?
The propositions that we have built in. So we feel these similarities, will bring in a lot of value, in terms of our service delivery, the proposition delivery, and serving that customer groups, without too much of an interruption. We also feel that the wide range of products that is on offer at Nations Trust Bank is going to add a lot of value to the customers, to bring in range of products that is, that to suit their different requirements at various stages of their life. Apart from that, we will also bring in the experience that we have in serving the mass-affluent customer groups that we have serviced for a long period of time. We were the first local bank to introduce private banking in Sri Lanka. We were the first local bank to introduce private banking centers to service private banking customers in Sri Lanka. Now, these are huge value additions that, it's huge legacy experience that we will bring onto the table. Our service proposition runs across the organization. The bank is, over the last 25 years, built on delivering service quality to our customer. Running across all the value chains. I think this will offset, or will come in handy when we do this transition of customers from HSBC to Nations Trust Bank, Shamundra.
Just to understand from where I am, right? HSBC consumer banking division, when it comes to you, will many of those customers be joining your private banking proposition? If you talk in terms of how you segmented it in a way, in brands, in a way that kind of I understand or somebody watching this understands, how does it work?
Yeah. So I think the underlying philosophy is that we want to keep this simple as much as possible.
Okay.
We want it to be seamless as much as possible for the customer. So what we have done is, if you are a customer of HSBC and if you are a premium customer at HSBC, those customers will come and sit at Nations Trust Bank private banking.
Right.
You'll just match the segment that they are in, and the proposition is pretty much similar. So that the things will be pretty much seamless. So likewise, the mass-affluent segment that is sitting at HSBC will also come and sit with our mass-affluent product offering, which is called the Inner Circle.
Right.
And they will, continue to get the...
So Nations Trust Bank currently has the two segments already working, set up. These have been there for a while, have they?
So our private banking franchise is the oldest. amongst the local bank.
Sure.
We've been in this space since 2001. With first local bank to introduce private banking in Sri Lanka. We were the first local bank to set up private banking centers in Sri Lanka. Servicing this affluent customer group. We have experienced relationship managers who are looking after these customers. So, I mean, it's a sort of a well-oiled machine, I would say. The transition will be pretty much seamless, and the service proposition will be set up there, as good as what they have been.
Right. Kushlani, let me bring you in. Besides acquiring the business for which you will be paying, you are paying something 18 billion rupees. Right. You also have to consider the immediate impact on your balance sheet, because when you take on these assets, there will be impacts on how your capital is used up, how your capital is allocated, right? When you look at how the balance sheet is currently placed, explain to us how you considered capital and continuing to offer great returns to your shareholders, for instance.
So I think capital we have kind of built over the years.
Right.
So in terms of the buffers that we have built over the years, that kind of gives us the comfort to carve out this 18 billion and, to how best we deploy it. So I think we have been waiting for the correct opportunity.
Right.
What is the best transaction to get
Can
into.
you quickly tell us what your capital adequacy ratios are, the equity and debt capital that can be counted, that's tier 1 and tier 2?
Yeah, so in terms of tier 1 and tier 2, we are right now around 17 to 18%.
Right. And what's the minimum that you have to
So
meet on this?
minimum on tier 1 is 8.5.
Right.
And the minimum on tier 2 is 12.5. So that
Right.
kind of shows the buffer
Right.
we have to absorb this kind of a transaction.
So when it has to be 12.5 altogether, you are at 17 plus.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
Right? So in terms of, as with any large transactions, right, you have to do your risk reward modeling to ensure that the returns are identified properly. So immediately you do have an impact to your P&L and to your balance sheet. But this portfolio is going to generate returns immediately. The moment we acquire, the portfolio will start kicking in the returns. So there's no question of waiting for the returns to kick in. But it's also really how you maximize or leverage the perimeter over a period of time to bring that enhanced return that we would want. Right. So that is how you balance your immediate to the medium-term returns. And then, as with any large transaction, I think one of the plus points we had in this was the fact that we have a track record of how we have performed financially in these spaces. If you take the consumer business or if you take the credit cards, in terms of where we have the financial strength. So we know what the revenue drivers are. We know what really works in the portfolio, the portfolio dynamics. So that's a comfort. So when we were modeling the scenarios, that was something that
I'm trying to understand the impact on your balance sheet of this transaction, right? So obviously there is an 18 billion in cash that will go out when you do this, when you buy this portfolio, you take this portfolio over, right? But once you've taken the portfolio over, you've got to allocate an amount of capital to match the risks associated with the new portfolio. Suddenly you're getting this portfolio, right? So are you suggesting, Kushlani, that you still don't need new capital? You have enough, even after paying for this transaction and allocating capital for the new portfolio, you still have a good capital position.
So how it really works is the consideration or the purchase consideration that will go out from us has an immediate impact on our tier 2 capital. Right. So that's about a 4% impact.
Okay.
Then in terms of the risk-weighted assets that we get from the portfolio, there is an element of capital that we need to allocate. So with all of that, we are saying we are still strong on our capital position.
Right.
So as I said, we have built it over the years and we were waiting for the correct opportunity, to bring the transaction in.
Hemantha, how much of liberty do you have currently to tell us about the quantum of the acquisition? We know the price, but what's the breakup of this acquisition? How many customers? How many credit cards? How much of a book are you acquiring? Are you at liberty to say that? What can you say?
Yeah, I'll share what we can.
Okay.
Like I said, we expect around 200,000 customers is the transaction. That's a disclosed figure. It includes a credit card portfolio. That's a very important one because we are the largest issuer. They are the second largest. So it's a marriage of 1 and 2. Expect a very dominant position in the credit card market. In the premium segment, what we call private banking, we will again be a dominant player because we already have a strong market share. We've been doing it for 25 years. It's island-wide. We've got a very strong franchise in the urban areas. So we will double up on that in terms of our base in private banking. Importantly, Shaminda, I think you earlier touched on the question of the international coverage.
Yeah.
So let me just talk a bit about that as well, because if you really dissect what international means for a Sri Lankan client, because we do have exchange control, there's no free transfer of capital from the country. So when you consider the regulations, what does it really mean? So one key factor is payments overseas. For example, credit cards. Now like I said, we've had a 20 plus year relationship with American Express. We are the sole issuer of the American Express Centurion line. So we also issue MasterCard, and that's something we'll do increasingly. And we will also issue Visa. So we'll be a multi-card bank. So if you come to us and say, guys, I need a credit card, we can give you Amex, a MasterCard, and a Visa at the same time. So which means when you travel, all those cards will work. So from international payments perspective, you're fully looked after. You're fully kitted out. Then you come back to other payments, like student payments. So that's straightforward. We can do that. Other international payments, permitted transactions, we can do that. So really, when you dissect it, Shamindra, the only thing that we will lack is a global network, of being part of a global bank. So we're a local bank, So apart from that, from a customer's perspective, from a customer's banking experience perspective, we will be able to provide pretty much everything that a customer needs in terms of the international banking. So I think that's a good point, and we see a lot of value in that.
Sheahan, in a connected question to what Hemantha is now talking about, how do you kind of ensure that in this transition and as you take this acquired business forward also, that this integration doesn't lead to an averaging down of everything? That's a challenge or something that you may have put some thought into it. What are your thoughts about how do you keep the proposition, if you will, sharp for anybody who wants to be there?
If you look at the two propositions, it's pretty much aligned. I mean, there we don't find too many differences in terms of the value proposition that we have on both banks, actually. So in terms of the offerings, it's pretty much straightforward. There will be seamless sort of a transitions from HSBC to Nations Trust Bank. In addition to that, what we will bring onto the table is the wider range of products that we will have on offer for the retail customer. I mean, capturing every stage of your life. There will be various additional requirements that will be coming in. I mean, you start with a normal savings account, current account, then you move on to a credit card, then you need a personal loan, vehicle loan, housing loan, your children's account, So there will be a list of things at various stages that you will, need to have. And that range we will bring onto the table, and that's something that the customers will have in addition to, what you will get at present. Apart from that, we will have a 90 branch network. We will have extended banking hours in some of the branches. We will have Saturday banking coming in. We will have a dedicated contact center, serving our customers, any day of the...
So the 7 branches that come along with the business, with the HSBC business, are ones that you will continue to operate? We
will continue to operate them.
Right.
And, customers can walk into those branches and feel at home. It will be like Nations Trust Bank branch, when they walk in.
Right.
So Shamil, if I can just add to Sheahan, I think the other key differentiator in terms of valuing up, I would say, is the service proposition.
Right.
So obviously, especially with the premium segment, The real differentiator is the service quality.
Okay.
Nation's Trust has been built on service. We are a relatively young bank. So we were able to challenge the market 25 years ago by really bringing a totally different service mindset to the market. And we've, I think, really disrupted the service quality in the banking industry. So that's what we will bring to the table for the incoming customers.
Right.
And we feel there's a lot of value in that. And that will be very, we are confident it will be value positive for the customers who are coming in.
Okay. As CEO, you must be considering the several areas of challenges that you will face. You have to make sure this has a positive impact on the balance sheet. You have to watch the P&L. You want immediate returns, like Kushlani was saying. The portfolio has to start returning for you. You also have the practicalities of combining a portfolio that you're acquiring, right? How does that fit into your system? Are the parameters the same? And then you potentially have a team that's coming over. There's going to be some uncertainty on, different cultures. I mean, maybe there is a lot of similarity, but also no two cultures are exactly alike. So you must be kind of weighing all this, right? As CEO, what are your priorities? What are the things that you think you need to get done?
Yeah, so I think you're right. I mean, for us, first of all, it's a huge opportunity. So, and the scale of that opportunity makes it fully worth it to go through a fair bit of work, to be honest. And I think we are fully kitted out to take that on. So if I were to break it down into some of the parts, one is the run-up to the transaction.
Right, okay.
So we expect to complete the transaction, have the migration towards the end of April. Well on track, and it's a joint project. We have some of the best international resources working with us, working for us in terms of consultancy. So the first objective is to make sure that the project is successful in terms of what we call the implementation project.
Right.
We are more than halfway through it. Very confident that it will be absolutely seamless.
And when you're talking about the implementation project, you're talking about bringing these customers in and fitting them into your systems and processes?
Yes. So that includes systems alignment, that includes data,
right?
The customers, so which means customer records, the full works.
Right.
And then we have the people.
Sure.
So I think on the people, we feel there is a lot of alignment in terms of culture between the two organizations. That's probably one of the main reasons we were the ones who were selected in a highly competitive bidding process. But to start with, having an aligned culture, more or less, is a big win. Apart from that, I think a key is to have trust on both sides. So our culture is such that NTB is built on, we are a real melting pot. Right. We are a mix of talent from within Nations Trust, who've been with us for a long time from inception, and a large influx of external talent. And that's what has made the bank progress, very fast in a short period of time. So having another cohort of colleagues coming from another bank with a culture that's very similar to ours really will not be a major challenge, because I'm pretty confident that the assimilation of the two teams will be seamless, and we've got lots of work happening behind it to make sure it's seamless and make sure everybody is welcome. And we're able to offer all of them an opportunity to really thrive in a new banking environment.
How does the switchover happen now? You just indicated that this may be March or April, when
end of April, early May, very likely.
End of April, early May, then when the switchover happens, right? How does that happen? Do you overnight switch customers from that side to this side? Is it you take them over from group to group? How does that happen?
No, it's a big bang, if you like, cut over. It's almost like flipping a switch. Right. So basically, we will go into what we call the cut-over weekend, if you like. Anecdotally, on Friday, they are not our customer. Then we go into a short blackout period, at which point on the systems, the data starts transferring. Once we're on the other side, we will inform the market, we will inform clients individually through messages that we are live.
Right.
So it's a seamless process, although there will be a short blackout period like in any data transfer. But it will be seamless. I'm sure it's going to be a massive learning experience for us. There hasn't been a banking acquisition or a merger for a long time.
Yes.
this is a portfolio acquisition. So we are super excited in terms of going the journey.
Right.
We've got a wonderful partner on the other side. And it's been a great partnership, and it will definitely be a success.
Sheahan, how does this work out for customers of HSBC, the portfolio you're acquiring, right? Assume somebody has an account there, somebody has a credit card there, and if that person's me, I'm wondering, what does it mean? Can I use my card? When can I use my card? Till when will I get a replacement card? Is that automatic? Do I have to talk to you? Will you talk to me? How does it work?
Yeah. So the communications have started from HSBC. They have been, informed the process, how the process will happen. We will start our process informing the customers, starting from probably somewhere March onwards. They'll get to know how the transition is going to happen, what will happen to your account, how it will come and get parked at Nations Trust Bank, what will happen to the card, how the replacement card will happen, how do you activate the card. So all that information, will be given to the customer probably maybe a month, 1.5 months before the cutover happens. And they will be well informed in due course.
Yeah. Kushlani, as you're acquiring this portfolio, can you talk us through the components of this portfolio? We know of credit cards, we know of accounts, savings accounts, maybe current accounts. Are there loans in the portfolio? Are there mortgages in the portfolio? What does this portfolio consist of? And how are you preparing from a financial point of view to kind of have the impact of that portfolio on day one?
So from a product proposition perspective, the larger chunk is on the credit cards,
right,
and on the deposits, and of course on the CASA balances. So those are the three main components that really interest us.
Right. So that is the current account and savings account balances, the credit cards?
Credit cards and the fixed deposits.
And the fixed deposits,
yes.
Okay.
So in terms of how we are preparing ourselves to get the data in terms of the whole testing process, which is currently going on. So it's a very well-planned, meticulous, process that is currently going on to ensure the data transfers are accurate.
Right.
And then we have to ensure the balances comes through seamlessly at the time, when we switch from being HSBC to Nations Trust Bank.
Right.
So we are, as Hemantha said, we do have global partners supporting us, advising us on the whole transition, as well as some areas we're getting our external auditors also to help out to ensure the transaction is seamless and that at cutover date we have a smooth portfolio coming to the bank.
So besides, flipping the switch like Hemantha said and, transferring the data, you have to possibly ensure this data is accurate, that there hasn't been a glitch and somebody's become a billionaire and somebody else has,
yes, of course.
lost all their savings.
So that's why, as I said,
that won't happen, don't worry.
So there's quite a few masked, unmasked data cutovers, that is dress rehearsals that is happening.
Okay.
So we have to ensure those are smooth, and then finally it's a go decision, right?
Right.
There's no
going back. Shamindra, I think from where I sit, I just say we just flip the switch.
Right.
But these guys are doing a lot of work. So behind the scenes,
you're testing this transfer system out.
Yes.
In and out.
Yes. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's very well planned, meticulous, and that's why we're taking about 6 to 7 months jointly on this project to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And we have complete control on both sides in terms of the data coming in and make sure that customers have a seamless experience.
So if I may also chip in, Shamindra. So as a bank, we are very committed to ensure that the customer have access to their funds on the first day itself. So we will ensure that their debit cards are sent on time, their checkbooks are sent on time. So they will get all these well in advance, so that they will have access to their funds on the first day of the cutover. So that's our commitment to the customers actually.
On that portfolio you were referring to, Kushlani, the three components of the portfolio, capital allocations, that have to back these portfolios are known. I suppose the risk weights are known. Which ones are more capital intensive and which versus others? Can you tell us?
So actually the portfolio itself is a very low risk portfolio.
Right. Okay.
So it's a net liability position.
Right.
So which then you can understand where the
Okay.
risk-weighted assets and the allocations are
Okay.
going to be. So that's the reason why, in terms of a portfolio perimeter, there's not too much of capital allocation when it comes. But it's
So
actually
just to define net liability, there is more in terms of deposits than
come.
there is lending in this
That's
portfolio that you're going to acquire. Right.
That's right.
Okay. So continue.
Yes. So as I said, in terms of the portfolio per se, like you take the credit cards portfolio or the deposit side. So the earnings generation and all of that is mainly related to interest income and your fee generation. And we have pretty much similar customer profiles. So we know what we are expecting to get from the portfolio when
Right.
the transition happens. So those things have been modeled. The business cases have been developed. So right now, if you ask me, I kind of know what the P&L should look like in month of May.
Right.
So that is where we are trying to get at.
Right. Sheahan, if I can bring you in, once you kind of brought this portfolio in-house, where do you think growth will come from? Right, in the portfolio that you acquire, and then you have the private banking proposition, and you have what you call a mass-affluent product called Inner Circle. Again, a product that's been around for a while, right?
Correct.
A long
Yes.
time, right? Where do you see the growth in these portfolios coming from?
Yeah. So, I mean, enormous amount of opportunities,
Right.
especially in terms of the products that's going to be on offer to customers, both in terms of affluent customer groups as well as the mass affluent customer groups. Both segments, there's, range of products that we can offer them, starting with the liability products as well as asset products. But they will seize the speed in which that we will deliver some of these products to them, and then the proposition itself, how to the propositions that they can add value to their lifestyle. So that's something that we will bring, and that's something that is on the upside on this whole portfolio.
Hemantha, when you look back on this switchover, end April, early May switchover, in 2 or 3 years, what will success, how will you measure success in 2 or 3 years of this transaction?
So let me just backtrack, Shamindra, on that to our history.
Right.
NTB has been in the market for about 26 years. So one of the youngest banks. We've had growth spurts to come to where we were to a large extent through acquisitions. We've had several smaller ones, but the big one was MX in about 2001, right? About 25 years ago. So today we are the market leader in cards through MX. Around 2006, the bank acquired mercantile leasing. Today we are one of the biggest banking players in leasing. So our acquisitions in the past have been a tremendous success, and it's helped the bank to really pivot and scale up. This particular transaction is bigger than all of them.
Right.
It fits perfectly with the segments that we are in already, the segments and the product groups that we are strong in, and with the customer groups and serving customer groups that we're good at serving and that we've served for a long time, for like 25 years in private banking. So this transaction, looking back 3 years, I see it giving scale to us as a bank in terms of balance sheet, capital, and performance. I see it strengthening our liquidity and financial ratios. I see it making our presence in the market to some of these key customer groups a lot more meaningful, which means we'll be able to do a lot more for our customers. For example, in terms of the wealth management space, that's an area that is relatively untapped. We already have the option of providing several products to them through the bank directly. So it's going to be very interesting, Shamindra. In credit cards, we will be the market leader by far. We will be the bank. We will be the only bank that can issue all 3 major card schemes. Because MasterCard and Visa is fairly common out there, but we are the only issuer of American Express, Centurion range, from the Platinum Reserves to Explorer to the Plat cards. So it's a unique proposition, you know. So I think I wouldn't wait 3 years. I think in 12 to 24 months, we feel we'll be a different bank. Because what happens in consumer in terms of balance sheet expansion, in terms of liabilities, funding, can be leveraged in other areas, like in corporate banking.
Right.
Because your bank is bigger, you have a
Sure.
bigger funding base, you're able to, you know, raise funds at a totally different scale. You know, so that's going to help the entire bank. So not just consumer, but the entire bank is going to kind of benefit from that.
So if I also may come in, I mean, how we will look at the success, you know, apart from the financial benefits that we are going to arrive out of this, we'll also want to ensure that, you know, we will also measure how we will create value to the incoming customers. Actually.
Right.
You know, we are very committed to, you know, create value to the incoming customers. And the other key pillar that we will look at is the incoming colleagues who will, you know, cross over to us. We will want to ensure that they settle in and they will have great careers at Nations Trust Bank. So these are 3 key areas that we are focusing on. That's something that we are committing ourselves, and that's something that we will keep monitoring as we.
So if you have potentially several hundred people joining you, you know, are your facilities capable of accommodating that currently, or
Yes.
you have to think about that?
Yeah, so we have looked at it. I mean, when we did our pitch, I mean, we looked at all those things. I mean, we just didn't, you know, bring in a pitch, you know, not looking at the infrastructure, the structures. You know, there were a lot of, you know, detailed things that we went into, you know, at the time, you know, just before, you know, before the pitch went in. So all those were looked at, and we are well, you know, covered with, you know, how we are going to bring them in, where they're going to be sitting. You know, we have a plan for each and every incoming colleague who will come over to us.
In terms of the core banking system, the software at the heart that runs your operation, because everything is digital right now, Kushlani. So have you had to consider bringing in new components to that system to accommodate the migration of all these clients, or were your systems configured in such a way that more or less there's compatibility?
Compatibility, yes. But in terms of scale, obviously, we had to kind of advance.
Oh, right.
You know, it's like another 3-year, 4-year scale that we are just getting it upfront. So
Right.
there are some integration expenses that we have identified and expensed for.
How does it work in banking? Do you kind of, as you scale, do you pay for capacity, or is that how it works on the cloud?
Yes. So from a transaction processing system, you have to, when you're expanding your capacity, there is a licensing fee that you have to pay.
Oh, right. Okay.
That is treated as capital expenditure, and we have to take that in.
Right. Hemantha, finally to you, you know, what would you say to the potential new employees of Nations Trust Bank who will come with the portfolio that comes from NTB, and also to the potential new customers that you will acquire, and when you flip that switch on that day, you know, a few months from now, what do you have to say to them?
So I think for both, for the employees coming in, Shamindra, and for the customers who will come in to become our customers, I think the key is there's going to be a lot of fit in terms of culture, in terms of the way we operate, our values, you know, how we do things, you know. So as Nations Trust, whether it's with our employees or with our customers, we are very clear in terms of sticking to our values, following the highest standards of governance, fairness, equal opportunities. So all these will be benefits for the folks coming in as team members and also our customers. For the customers, like we said, the proposition is seamless, you know. So it's going to be a very, very familiar banking proposition. Our customer service standards, we like to think that it's very strong. We will invest a lot more in it. They will experience strong digital platforms because we've spent a lot of time and effort in terms of making sure that our digital platforms are customer friendly in terms of our UI, UX. So the experience hopefully will be very positive, Shamindra. So for us, this is a great opportunity. We are putting in every effort we can and every investment that is needed to make it a success for the people who are coming in, for the customers who are coming in. And I think for the overall Sri Lankan market, it's going to be a great story because, it's a big uptick in the private banking space. When I say private banking, I'm on the private banks in terms of consolidation of portfolios, becoming larger, stronger, which means we'll be able to invest a lot more in the future. So I think overall, very excited and lots to look forward to. Very confident that it's going to be a complete success.
This will also showcase that the local banks are capable of, doing these sort of transactions, number one, and then going through a migration, making the success. So those are big statements, from a local banking industry point of view, actually.
So, Kushlani, Sheahan, Hemantha, fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shamindra.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.